All right, let's get into it. Oh. Oh. Wow, why did I do that, you might be asking? Well, today I'm here to give you a little taste of the Tipsy Kylie. The Tipsy Haunted Hippie. This month, happy Pride by the way, I will probably just be making a fool of myself more and more as the month goes on. That's because I'm fundraising for my next short horror film. The fundraiser has only been live for 24 hours and we've already made $533. That's with only 11 donors, so imagine what we could do with the power of the rest of the cult of Haunted Hippie. If all of you just donated $1, we'd have over $20,000. Why did I just chug this White Claw though? Right, I forgot you asked me that. So the first incentive, once we hit $1,000, I am going to walk into the Pacific Ocean. I think I also might potentially watch one of the horror movies that I said that I would never watch, maybe Martyrs, maybe Inside, and I'll probably stream myself on Twitch watching the movie. But once we hit $2,000, I'm going to do a drunk live stream. This is just to give you a little taste of the chaos that may ensue. So, down the hatch. Also, if you're brand new here and you were like, I'm sorry, the what of Haunted Hippie? Yes, we are a cult, okay? It's not that weird, and also it would be really cool if you joined us. So all you have to do is click subscribe, and if you click the notification bell, then you'll never miss our next meeting. And we'll be having a lot of those this month, okay? We're all brainstorming. This is a team effort. We're trying to get this movie made. And you're like, why would I care about that? Oh, I don't know. Check out the first one that I made. It's called Somnum. You can find it on my channel. I'll link it down below. This is the first movie that I made with only $1,600, so imagine what I could do with more. That's what's in it for you, the entertainment value. If you're watching this video from way into the future, I'm sorry, that must have been jarring. Hopefully you're watching from a time when my movie is out and the critics all loved it and it's just booming away in the festival circuit. So anyways, I'm also doing this video unscripted, if you couldn't tell, because I got some positive feedback lately that you guys like it when I'm unscripted. So unscripted, White Claw, I mean, what? This isn't a White Claw, don't tell YouTube. Today's recap is probably gonna be a little bit more chaotic than usual. I hope you're excited. Now that we have all of that out of the way, let me tell you sort of the order that I do these in. I start with all the TV shows that I watched, so this month that includes Barry, Bones, and Yellow Jackets. Then I talk about all the non-horror movies that I watched. I watched Air, and I watched The Little Mermaid. Then I'll talk about all my horror rewatches, and there probably won't be too many in this category because a lot of them are Mike Flanagan movies, and I already talked at length about all those movies in my Mike Flanagan deep dive. Then I'll talk about my new watches of old horror movies. I finally went back and watched Donnie Darko for the first time since I was a child, so I'm counting that as a new watch. Finally, we'll get into new horror releases, which include movies like Summoning Sylvia and Influencer. If that sounds good to you, then sit back, grab a snack, grab a drink, and let's dive right in. Okay, so starting off with the TV shows, I started rewatching Bones, which is like such a mistake, but also one of the best ideas I've ever had. Oh wait, I need the synopses. Or wait, should I not read the synopses and just try my best to explain it on my own? Is that funnier? Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Okay. Bones follows Agent Celie Booth and Temperance Brennan. She's a forensic psychologist and he is an FBI agent. There's also this huge team of other super sexy scientists and they all solve murders together. I love this show so much. I watched it as a kid and when I was in high school and I literally thought that I was gonna be a forensic anthropologist, but I don't have science brain, I have creative filmmaker brain. So that didn't work out, but I still love this show. A lot of it has horror vibes. I mean, all the practical effects of the gloopy, disgusting skeletons, I love it. There are also so many celebrity cameos. I started rewatching it just this month and I'm already almost finished with season 5. It's a long show. They're like 45-minute episodes and there's 22 to 24 episodes per season and it's 15 seasons long, but I'm just blowing through it. And I just watched the episode where Robert Englund guest stars and they make all these references to Freddy Krueger. It's wonderful. That show is so funny. I'm obsessed with it. It's like my comfort show, but I don't think I've ever finished it. And a lot of it is a little bit more problematic than I remembered. A lot of it is a little bit before its time. So it's just like this really weird mix of sometimes it's really well well-intentioned, like when they explore themes about sexuality, but then they do it in kind of like a problematic way, but it was just so early 2000s. But we will always have Angela, our bi icon. Happy Pride! The next show that I tried to watch was Barry, and note that I said that I tried to watch it because I only watched the first 2 episodes. Basically, Barry is this assassin guy, and he lives in a very satirical world in this show, and he falls in love with acting, which is great because his teacher is Henry Winkler. And I don't know, I just got kind of a weird vibe from the show. Like, it wasn't really that funny to me, which is fine because like it's satire, it's not really haha funny, but I wasn't quite feeling it. I do want to try to keep watching it though because I love Bill Hader. I think he is so talented, and also because I've heard that tonally the show really changes over the course of its seasons, and it just finished with season 4, and it's such a quick watch too because the episodes are like under 30 minutes. There's only 8 per season, so I'll get there. I will. But the last show that I watched was Yellow Jackets season 2. You already know that I've been talking about this show for a while because I finally just started it, what with season 2 coming out. Season 2 was pretty good. It definitely wasn't as good as season 1, but I really liked episodes like 7 through 9, the last 3 episodes, just because I feel like the build-up in season 2 wasn't quite as good. I felt like there definitely was a lot more filler this time around. So then I heard some people saying that the end of the season felt a little bit rushed, and I would kind of agree, but kind of disagree, just because I feel like all the meat of the season definitely was in those last episodes. A lot of the stuff before that was just filler. I don't feel like it was necessarily rushed in the end. There just wasn't that much happening before. But Elijah motherfucking Wood, he is such a good addition to this season. I love how he plays off of Christina Ricci. I think they are perfect. He is such a good character in this show, and it was heartbreaking. It was, I think it was still a good season, especially because Karen Kusama directed the season finale of season 2. Oh, I see you and I love you. But that will do it for TV shows. Wait, no, it won't. Oh my god, I started rewatching Wizards of Waverly Place. I started rewatching it because I started listening to the Wizards of Waverly pod. It's the podcast that's hosted by David DeLuise and Jennifer Stone, and they're just doing like a retrospective rewatch podcast, and it's very nostalgic for me. It was like my favorite TV show when I was a kid, and rewatching it, there's a lot of adult humor. I'm actually pleasantly surprised with how I feel about it now. But that's like on the back burner. That's if I finish a movie or something or an episode of Bones and I'm like, well, I have time for a little 20-minute show. So anyways, doesn't really count. Let's move on to the non-horror category. Up first, Return of the Jedi came back to theaters, and this was my first time ever seeing my favorite Star Wars movie in the whole world in theaters. I think it was my first time seeing no, it wasn't my first time seeing a Star Wars movie in theaters. That would be Rogue One. No, it wouldn't be. That would be The Force Awakens, I'm pretty sure. So it was just surreal to be able to see one of the classic original trilogy films in theaters. But you know Star Wars. I don't need to talk your ear off about Star Wars. So up next would be Air. This is the new Matt Damon and Ben Affleck movie about Michael Jordan and his shoes. I guess I don't have much else to say about the synopsis here. It follows these dudes at the Nike company as they're like, oh my god, how do we sign Michael Jordan? We want that boy. And it's good. It's really good. On Letterboxd, all I could think to say was this is such a win for dad cinema because it is such a dad movie. All the guys in this movie are total dads. That's just the vibe. And I don't mind that. I love some good dad cinema every once in a while. So this was like a 4.5 star movie to me, but there's not much else to say because it's Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. Obviously, it's kind of like a little Oscar baity, but it was a fun time. I enjoyed learning about Michael Jordan and his shoes. Up next, I finished rewatching the Twilight franchise, including Eclipse and both Breaking Dawns, and I've concluded that Eclipse is the far superior film in that franchise. But I don't need to talk your ear off about Twilight. I've probably done that enough in the 3 years on my channel. Up next, we have Arctic. This is a little indie feature starring Mads Mikkelsen, our Danish hunk. This is a very simple movie. Maybe you could classify this as horror because I would never ever want to be trapped out in the Arctic like this. It's just a good old survivor movie. It's very simple, and it's him and this other woman that he's trying to save. It was solid. There's not like a lot there, but that's kind of just the point of the movie. It's just a basic survival movie. Mads Mikkelsen has also referenced this as the hardest movie he's ever shot in his entire career. And I get that because they were on location in Greenland. He was really out there in the snow. And movie shoots typically last at least 12 hours long every day, so he was actually freezing his ass off and physically exerting himself for a lot of the stuff he did did in this movie. It was good. I recommend. Probably just like a one-time watch unless you're really in the mood for a winter movie. It sort of has a similar vibe to The Thing, just in terms of setting. But up next, oh, I had such a good double feature night. My German sister was in town and we were waiting up for her train because it didn't leave until like 2:30 in the morning. So we were like, let's have a little double feature, and we watched Dazed and Confused and But I'm a Cheerleader. I had never seen either of these movies before somehow, which just feels sinful because now that I have seen them, I love them both so much. Dazed and Confused is basically the Superbad of 1993. There's no plot, it's just a lot of vibes, and it's just one of those one crazy night type movies. It's funny, it's the movie where Matthew McConaughey gets probably his most famous phrase, all right, all right, all right. But my favorite line of his is when he's like, do you have a joint? And he's like, no. And he's like, be a lot cooler if you did. I loved Dazed and Confused. It literally was a perfect movie to me, and I don't often give out 5 stars. But for Dazed and Confused, I did. And I almost did for But I'm a Cheerleader as well. This movie is so gay. It's just this really satirical look at how heterosexuality is like imposed on young people in society. But it's done in such a funny way, and it's a little rom-com, and oh, the romance is actually so genuine and sweet. I think all the performances are really, really good. Natasha Lyonne, what a darling. Clea Duvall, what a babe. I knew that this was like a gay movie, but I had only heard little flutterings of it. No one ever told me how gay it actually is. I want to own both of those movies on DVD or Blu-ray now. I'm like dying to get my hands on them. I need to own them, to caress them, to be able to hold them. I don't know. I want to itch my tattoo. So crusty. I can't recommend both of those movies enough, honestly. But moving on, trying not to dwell in the non-horror stuff. Up next we have Ice Age, which this was kind of like an accidental watch. I don't even know. I was with this boy. Okay, we had just finished watching Breaking Dawn Part 2, and at that point we're hammered, right? Because I told you that we're playing drinking games along to the Twilight franchise. And for some reason we were like, let's absolutely watch Ice Age right now. So we did, and it was great. It is one of the most beloved movies from my childhood. It really does not quite hold up, but the rest of the franchise is a lot better than that first movie. The first movie just happens to be the one that I was obsessed with as a child, and when you start a franchise, you gotta start with the first movie, right? So we will probably continue to drunkenly revisit the rest of that franchise. But yeah, Ice Age, that was fun. If you're somehow unfamiliar, a sloth, a mammoth, and a saber-toothed tiger rescue this human baby, and they take it back to its people. It's one of the dumbest movies ever, and it has such a stacked cast. Like, I'm obsessed with that franchise. But anyways, that's not what you're here for. One last non-horror movie to talk about today. That would be the brand new Little Mermaid. Finally saw this one. I waited for the busy weekend to be over because I did not want to see this in a theater packed full of children, and I got my wish. Just like Ariel got her wish. Badumps. You already know this story. The only thing different about it now is that we have just one of the best Disney princesses ever to live. And then we also have some of the worst original new songs that I've ever heard. They do this thing where they put in these brand new, terrible original songs, often produced by Lin-Manuel Miranda, because that's the only way for these remakes to be considered for any type of Oscar nominations. So there's a song in that movie called Scuttlebutt, and it's just really bad. It's as bad as it sounds. But this movie was good. Like, it was a little bit above average. It wasn't anything great, but the chemistry between our leads, oh, it was to die for. Halle Bailey is going to be one of the most famous people in the world someday. She's already well on her way, but oh my god, what a talent. Melissa McCarthy was pretty good as Ursula, like I think as good as it could get, but I don't know, something about her look and everything was really distracting, so I wasn't obsessed with that. A lot of the underwater stuff, I don't know, it didn't look great, but it was better than some of the teasers would have you believe. I would recommend it. I think it's worth seeing, which is saying something considering the lineup of other Disney remakes they've put out. Actually, lastly, for non-horror movies, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This is James Gunn's send-off for the Marvel Universe. This is the send-off for all of the Guardians of the Galaxy, and we go through Rocket's really tragic backstory and learn a lot about him. It's one last wacky adventure with this team that we love. This literally restored my faith in the Marvel franchise. Like, I was blown away by this movie. I have been just in utter disbelief and shock at how bad Phase 4 was. This was the breath of fresh air. This was the apology letter from Marvel Studios. Well, not really, because this was James Gunn's baby, and there was a whole thing with like him getting fired and then rehired, and so I think at that point he was like, you know what, I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I want. The music was just as good as ever. All the characters felt true to themselves. It felt like a really perfect send-off for them. Nothing really felt forced, and there is a plotline in this movie with Gamora 2.0 that you feel like, could be generic, could go one way, and it really doesn't. It's wonderful. It feels real. It feels so earnest, which is not at all how any of the Marvel movies have felt the past 2 years. The last one that I truly just loved was Shang-Chi, and then I really liked Multiverse of Madness, but even Multiverse of Madness had some stuff in it that was real dumb. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, I love you. I'm so happy for you. That one's still in theaters. I'm probably gonna try to see that in my Dolby Cinema, but I think that Little Mermaid might have taken that one over. The point is, I still want to see it in theaters before it's finished with its run. I cried like a goddamn baby. If you want to know my full thoughts with me and my dad, actually, we gave that one a solo review over on my Patreon. That was like a good 16-minute long video or so, and we managed to not get into any spoilers in that video. There was just a lot to talk about, I guess. It was funny. I laughed a lot. I cried also a lot. It just restored my faith in the fact that Marvel movies still can be good. Now, will they be good? I don't know, because not everyone can be James Gunn, but I think we can have a little more faith for the future. This isn't gonna completely save the franchise, but if they have another hit after this one, I think we'll be in good shape. Me saying we as if I am part of Disney or Marvel Studios, or as if this impacts me at all. I just mean like we, like the Marvel fandom. It was not like the usual slop we've been thrown lately. So anyways, enough about that. You can check out the full review on Patreon. Let's move on. And we can move on to all of my horror rewatches. So all of the Mike Flanagan movies that I rewatched would be Ouija Origin of Evil, Gerald's Game, and Dr. Sleep. All the rest of them I believe I had rewatched in April. Ouija Origin of Evil was definitely an improvement upon this viewing, and then so was Dr. Sleep. I love Dr. Sleep now. Gerald's Game was kind of the exact opposite. I had never finished it before, and it turns out that's a good thing because the last 10 minutes of that movie, oh baby, no bueno. I also finished rewatching the Final Destination franchise. I just had the 5th one to rewatch, now I'm all done. The 5th movie is not as good on a rewatch. Once you have that shock value gone, then the movie's only okay. Like, it has some good deaths and stuff, but the CGI in the 4th and 5th movies are just so deplorable. That ending, though, is still pretty good. But I also rewatched The Shining because I wanted to rewatch that along with Dr. Sleep, and this is the first time in my life I can officially say that I love The Shining now. I had always had some problems with Jack Nicholson's performance because the book is just so much better and it's just not well adapted, but just on face value of the movie, really my only complaint is that there's not enough of a build-up with his character. He's just a wacky weirdo from the jump. Like, there's no build-up to that, really. You always kind of know that something bad is gonna go down with his character. He's always kind of a piece of shit. So I feel like that's a valid complaint. I think that could have been built up a lot more throughout the movie, because everything else about like the atmosphere and the other acting performances definitely do lend itself to that, but not Jack Nicholson. Sorry if you disagree, crucify me. Or don't, because I don't know why I said that. My last rewatch of the month would be the lovely Midsommar. A few of my subscribers have been kindly referring to the person I'm dating as Final Destination Boy. I think we can upgrade his name now because I was showing him Midsommar. I was like, you know what? It's time to finally show you something that is super psychological. I've only shown you really like slashers and dark comedies, just movies that are really meant to entertain. It's time to watch something that's gonna really just fuck with your head, you know? And he loved it. And I was like, you know what? You're just saying that. And he was like, no, I loved it. So, I don't know, I guess I'll marry him now. That movie is still perfect. I was like a little bit scared, just a little bit, that I would hold a little bit of resentment from Beau is Afraid, just because I hated that movie so much. But that didn't detract literally anything at all from Midsommar. I don't know why I was scared of that happening. I think I might just have a little bit of like PTSD from the Halloween trilogy, because I loved Halloween 2018, I loved Halloween Kills, and then Halloween Ends. Just, oh my god. It's to the point now where when I go back and I watch Halloween 2018 and Kills, feels, I am just a little crestfallen because I know what they're building up to. And I just know that I'm not gonna get the satisfying ending that I really wanted, so that sucks. But Beau is Afraid, Midsommar, completely different things. So you'd think I would have been able to put 2 and 2 together there, but alas. Anyways, Midsommar is a perfect movie. I think it's hilarious. It's one of the best comedies ever made. Will Poulter, comedic genius.
What time is it?
It's 9 p.m.
What do you mean?
What do you mean?
That can't be right. The sky is blue.
It's fine. It's Sweden.
That's not fine. Why is it like that?
I need to see him in more movies like this. I want Ari Aster to cast him again. He was fine in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, but this is my favorite performance he's ever given. And I don't think I need to talk that much about Midsommar. You already know, it's one of my favorite horror movies of all time. So I think that I shall move on now to my new watches of old horror movies. First up, we have the remake to When a Stranger Calls from 2006, 2008. It Hardly Matters. This remake is one of the worst remakes I've literally ever seen. It might be the worst one I've ever seen. Quite literally, nothing happens in this movie. It is the most gentle and generic PG-13 horror movie you'll ever see. The only things that happen for the first hour and 10 minutes of this movie are this girl taking a tour through this big house, looking down long hallways, and getting phone calls, just talking on the phone and walking around this house. That is literally all that happens. It is without a doubt one of the most boring movies I've ever seen. I strongly recommend that you do not watch that movie. If you see it in a thrift store and you're like, oh, that would be nice for my collection. No, it wouldn't be. I made that mistake and now I wish that I kept my $3. I guess it might be a good movie for a drinking game though, because just, I don't know, drink anytime that nothing happens. You'd get tossed. Up next, we have a movie called Villains, starring Micah Monroe and Bill Skarsgård. And if you're like me, then you had no idea this existed and you're like, what? Yeah, it's a dark comedy and they play this couple that are basically like the modern day Bonnie and Clyde. They be sexy and do crime together basically. But then their car breaks down by this house where they find some really weird shit going on. And I loved the first like 15 minutes of the movie when it was just them and they were getting into all of their hijinks. I thought it was really funny. It's a dark comedy. But then once the homeowners show up, they just do not match the energy. It's really a letdown. Tonally, the movie is kind of inconsistent because you're thinking that this older couple will match their energy and it'll be like really funny and kooky. And then it just turns into like a really basic kind of thriller. It really bums me out because Micah Monroe and Bill Skarsgård had really good chemistry. I'd like to see them do something else together. But if you want sort of my more in-depth thoughts about that movie, then I would recommend subscribing over on my Patreon. I gave this movie sort of a full review over there. All I can say is that I don't know that it's necessarily worth it to rent. If I were you, I would probably wait until it's streaming for free somewhere. Same can be said for The Blackcoat's Daughter, which is the next movie that I watched for the first time. I couldn't really even tell you what this movie is about. It's been a few weeks since I watched it, and it's just such a mind f***. It's directed by Oz Perkins, who also did Gretel and Hansel, which is one of my favorite horror movies of 2020. So I was really expecting to like this movie, especially because I also really like the cast. But this movie is just not for me. I love art house horror movies, I really do, but this one was just a little too much for me. It was a little bit too much of a slow burn to the point where I couldn't really keep up with what was going on just because my eyes kept glazing over. And I do love a good slow burn sometimes, but I just don't feel like there was enough substance in this movie for me to be fully engaged. It also doesn't really feel like a horror movie. It definitely feels much more like a drama. Maybe that's how it's classified. I don't even know. I did point out in my Letterboxd review, I said this might have had more blank staring in it than the entirety of the Twilight franchise. That is saying something. I think that must have been why this movie grated on my nerves so much and why I felt like it was so slow. Because truthfully, there was so much staring, and that is only acceptable in the Twilight franchise in my opinion. Well, Midsommar has a lot of staring, but I feel like there's so much communicated with all the staring between the characters. Because sometimes in Midsommar, a simple stare means that somebody's getting sacrificed. Nothing of that kind of interest happened in The Blackcoat's Daughter. Although a lot of people really like this movie, it's rated really highly on Letterboxd and I think on like Rotten Tomatoes and stuff. And I mean, it has a 75% on Rotten Tomatoes, only a 4.5 out of 10 on Film Affinity. What the hell is that? Doesn't really matter. It has a 5.9 out of 10 on IMDb, so maybe I was wrong. I guess maybe this is not the critical darling that I thought it was. Oh my god, it's only an hour and 33 minutes long. It feels like it's 3 hours long. It also stars Emma Roberts, who, I think she's a very talented actress. I think that she is incredible in all the TV that she's done. For whatever reason in this movie, I don't know if it's because of of the direction, but I just do not love her performance. I think Kiernan Shipka is all right. I've never been like blown away by her, but I really like her as Sabrina in The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. The tone of the movie I think is pretty successful. I think it's exactly what they're going for. It's just very bleak. So in that sense, they did their job, I suppose, but it was just not a movie that I enjoyed. So moving on, let's talk about Stir of Echoes. This is an early 2000s Kevin Bacon horror movie. Oh god, I really need the synopsis for this one. This one's kind of confusing. Stir of Echoes follows this dude, Kevin Bacon, who gets hypnotized very early on in the movie, and then he starts dealing with all these weird visions, and it kind of consumes him. This movie I think is slightly underrated because it came out the same year as The Sixth Sense, so I feel like it probably got overshadowed. It has a very, very similar tone and even really similar themes of like children seeing dead people, but it's definitely not as effective as The Sixth Sense. Kevin Bacon is great. I think all the acting honestly is really good in the movie, but it has this super tacky editing that you will see then popularized throughout the early 2000s, because this movie was 1999, I think. Did I say early 2000s earlier? Whoopsie. Yeah, it's a 1999 movie. You can also find it on Tubi for free, by the way, but it has such an early 2000s vibe to it because of the editing, so you could easily mistake it for a movie that came out in like 2003. It's just tacky. It takes what is otherwise a very earnest story and just tackifies it. My dad didn't like it. I think he found the movie to be pretty worthless, but I just found it really entertaining. So I gave it a 3 out of 5. I feel like that's fair because no, it's absolutely not like this huge hidden gem that you've been missing out on, but it's entertaining, it's worth watching, and I'll probably revisit it at some point. And that's about it. Kind of a simple movie. Up next, we have a short film called The Hoarding, which is directed by Karen Gillan. I had no idea that she directed short horror movies on the side, but I think it's really cool. This is about 2 women who go into a hoarded house in order to clean it up. They've been hired to do so. And you'll notice she is the star of American Horror Story. I forget her name right now, but an icon. This short was not very good. I feel like it's worth watching just because it is so short and there is kind of a fun little moment that you don't expect. Otherwise, it's just really generic. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense either. And I want to explain why, but I think that you need to watch it in order to understand what I mean. So I don't want to get too into it because otherwise I would spoil it. And I know that some people consider this to be kind of a spoiler. There is a bit of like a twist moment in the movie. I don't consider knowing that there is a twist in the movie to be a spoiler, because if it's a good twist, then you're not going to see it coming regardless. In this movie, like, you definitely don't see it coming, but it's also like, what the hell was that, you know? So I didn't think it was very good, but I would love to see her direct more horror. I'm all about that. Even if they're just silly little passion projects that she does on the side, because she has made more than enough with all her Marvel gigs. So moving on to my last new watch, that would be Donnie Darko. In all fairness, like I said, I think I watched this movie when I was about 12, so that means it's been 11 years since I've seen it. Donnie Darko follows Donnie Darko, who is this schizophrenic boy that has visions of this bunny rabbit named Frank, and Frank influences him to do very bad things leading up to what is supposedly the end of the world. Donnie Darko is such a trip. It is a deeply psychological movie. It also has this really uncanny feeling where it takes place in modern suburbia, but something just feels really off. Jake Gyllenhaal, of course, is amazing, and his real sister was cast as his sister in this movie, so I really like their chemistry, as well as the chemistry that he has with Drew Barrymore. All their scenes together with her as his teacher I found to be really fascinating. This is also, I think, the feature debut of Seth Rogen. A lot of people just kept popping up in this movie, like Jerry Trainer too, who basically plays Crazy Steve yet again here, or maybe this was just his first iteration of it, but Spencer is a similar character. I've come to the conclusion he just plays the same character in every universe. Patrick Swayze is also there, and his character, ugh. It's a trip. Donnie Darko is a trip, but honestly, I don't find it to be the masterpiece that most people do. I get it, I do, because it's crazy, it's weird, there's this really full circle kind of beautiful moment that happens. It all kind of feels like everything suddenly makes sense, but it doesn't. And I don't know, it just didn't really have the intended effect on me. I was still kind of left scratching my head like, yeah, I mean, okay, I guess that's kind of cool, but it didn't really do for me what it does for a lot of people. I'm hoping that upon another rewatch, I'll kind of pick up on more little subtleties and I'll appreciate it more. That will do it for all my new watches of old horror though. It's time to move on to all the new horror releases that I watched. And that would begin with Clock. This is a new horror movie streaming on Hulu starring Diana Agron of Glee. Clock is such a weird movie. It follows this woman who does not want to get pregnant, and so she seeks out this really weird treatment in order to make herself want to be pregnant. I guess it's well-intentioned because at the end of the day, it is a pro-choice movie, but it's a pro-choice movie in the most like girl boss, yeah, rah rah kind of way, which is my least favorite kind of messaging in a movie because it just always comes off disingenuous. It's exactly like Promising Young Woman, where she just like girl bosses her sexual assault. And I'm like, you know what? These topics demand a lot more nuance if you're gonna do that, and this just was not it. I thought it was so bad, and the horror in it also is like really generic and tacky. I just didn't really find any redeeming qualities about this movie besides Diana Agron's performance. She's really talented. I want better for her. Oh my god, as well as Jan from The Office is in this. She plays the doctor that is giving her the treatment. So it was for that reason, those two ladies that I kept watching because they're familiar to me, they're comfortable to me. But I easily would have turned this movie off way sooner if it was full of a bunch of unknown actors. It's just really, really corny and generic. I don't know really what else I can say about it. I guess just that there is other effective pregnancy horror out there, and if I were you, I would seek that out and not watch this. So moving on to Summoning Sylvia. This is available on a lot of different sites. I used Prime. This movie follows a bunch of gay men as they celebrate at a bachelor party when, whoops, one of them invites a straight guy. And also, whoops, they accidentally summon a ghost. This movie is literally just exactly what you think it would be. I think it is an excellent Pride Month watch. I really enjoyed myself. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. So above average, worth my time. Maybe I would watch it again. I feel like I would only watch it again if I had it on physical media though. For some reason, it's part of the giant jumble mess that is Amazon Prime. So I'm not likely to remember its existence and seek it out again. That's why I'd really like it on physical media, but I don't think that's gonna happen. Anyway, I found a lot of it to be funny. A lot of it kind of falls flat, kind of doesn't work, but a lot of that is just because of some of the editing. Like, it's super low budget, and that is felt throughout the movie. It's very much just a one location movie, but for what they had, I think the story was really, really sweet, and you become so endeared to all the characters. Everyone is just so likable. They're all very different characters, and they all bring something really unique. There is kind of like a very basic homophobic to reformed character arc in this movie, but it's still cathartic nonetheless. There's definitely no horror, and if you complain that you don't like this movie, you don't think it's good because it's not scary, eat a bag of dicks, dude. Horror movies don't have to be scary. I don't know if this would even classify as a horror movie. I think it's pretty much just a straight up comedy. So don't go into it expecting to watch a horror movie. Go into it knowing that you're just watching a comedy. I had a lot of fun with it. I know that a lot of my fellow gay friends would as well. So I would recommend kicking back with a drink with that one. One of the last movies of the day would be Influencer, that just released to Shudder. Influencer follows a woman that is in Thailand. She ended up there because she originally booked this trip with her boyfriend, but he bailed on her last minute. But lucky for her, she meets a nice new friend. But it's a horror movie, so obviously things start to go wrong. This movie was entertaining. Like, it's definitely worth the watch, but it was a 3-star movie for me, just because I don't think that I would watch it again. It's definitely entertaining and worth your time. I think the acting performances are definitely what carry it, and also all the beautiful scenery. But all the beautiful scenery starts to become a bit much because it becomes obvious at a point that you're like, oh, okay, so this was a vacation tax write-off. The actors all hold their own though, and so they make the movie a little bit more captivating. It also has a tight runtime. I think it's only like an hour and a half long, maybe less than that. And it's never trying to take itself too seriously. It's got a really basic storyline. At a point, it starts to become really, really predictable, but there's still a fun few little sort of twists in there. I mean, not really, but if you tried really hard, I bet you could turn your brain off and this movie would become unpredictable. I hope to see more from the actresses in this movie. I really liked them. I haven't been watching a ton of Shudder stuff recently, so I can't say this for sure, but I think it's one of the movies that's going to be more worth your while that's been released to that platform this year. Alright, the last movie of the day would be Malum. This is by the same writer and director of Last Shift, and this movie is essentially a higher budget remake of that movie. So I don't know if you really need a synopsis. It's about this rookie cop that decides to take on a shift at this police department that is being shut down soon, and so a lot of weird stuff starts to happen. She's tormented by this cult, yada yada. I think it's so weird when directors do this. I don't know how many other examples there are of this. I mean, a good example of this is Mike Flanagan, who made Oculus Chapter 3. He took the bones of that short film and then he turned it into this really fleshed out, wonderful feature-length film. So much more character development, a much richer story. Malum doesn't do any of that. It doesn't expand on The Last Shift whatsoever, really, except for maybe bringing in some family relations explanations to the backstory. I don't think it does anything for the movie, and it's kind of a bummer to me that he would be gifted such a big budget and decide to remake one of his own films, especially because The Last Shift, that came out like 10 years ago, right? Yeah, it came out in 2014. Like, why would you do that? It's giving Eli Roth, and pretty much everyone on Letterboxd and Rotten Tomatoes and stuff agrees. Everyone is just like, man, why would you do this? They use some more modern horror conventions that I think are definitely an attempt to try to soften up the viewer and be like, you know this trope, you like this one, right? And it's like, yeah, but you threw it into a god-awful movie, so what are we doing here? Also, I swear to God, at one point, Cenobites show up. It's just not good. I wish that I were leaving off this recap on a better movie because this has been kind of a dry year for horror. I've been really disappointed, especially because last year was just so fantastic. I'm like, what happened? Malum, it started off feeling like it would be worth your time. I was enjoying myself throughout the first act, and then it just becomes really generic, and the entire movie basically becomes a giant hallucination. And no, it's not the twist where it's like, oh my god, she's been dreaming this whole time. I'm actually not spoiling anything, but there just comes a point in this movie where literally all it is just hallucination after hallucination after hallucination. And it gets so tiring, and it's not at all scary. What should be disorienting just becomes super tedious. So I almost wanted to recommend it because I'm like, well, the first act is good, and maybe some people would like it and hang with it, but I don't think that a lot of you guys would. I think that you should probably just save your time on that one, especially because it's only streaming on Shudder, so otherwise you'd probably have to rent it, and I don't think it's worth it. I'm gonna try to end on a more positive note, so I will pick my favorite movie or show from each category that I covered. As far as TV shows go, I love Yellow Jackets, I really do, but Bones, oh, it's just such a comfort show for me. I've been having a blast rewatching that. As far as the non-horror movie that I most highly recommend, that would have to go to Dazed and Confused. This is just like a stoner cult classic that you guys all have to watch. I literally gave it a perfect score. I think it's the only movie of the entire month that I did so, but a close second would be But I'm a Cheerleader. As far as horror rewatches go, it wouldn't really be fair if I said Midsommar because you already know that's one of my favorites of all time. So I would say The Shining, but I think that most of you guys already know about that one. I guess I just didn't rewatch that much stuff this month besides Mike Flanagan. For my new watches of old horror, I would definitely say Donnie Darko, although I don't know if you guys even classify that as horror. I do. I would classify it as psychological horror because Frank freaks me the fuck out. I don't know about you, but this reads as a horror to me. And I would probably put Stir of Echoes in second place. That's not a great movie, but I think it's worth a one-time watch if you've never seen it. And finally, for new releases, it's definitely between Summoning Sylvia and Influencer. I think for certain crowds, you'll definitely like one movie much more than the other. My personal favorite was Summoning Sylvia, but I could definitely see a lot of you guys enjoying Influencer. So that's gonna do it for my recap today, but I'm dying for some better new releases this year. If you have any to recommend to me, please don't be shy. Some movies that I have on my watch list for this month are the Japanese remake of Cube, Spoonful of Sugar on Shudder, The Unheard, and Consecration. I haven't really heard great things about any of those, but I am just looking for any hidden gem in the rough out here. So please don't be shy. Comment down below with any questions, comments, concerns. Now you probably noticed these names scrolling on screen. Yeah, these are my lovely patrons. Look at their pretty names. Look at them go by. These people keep my channel funded, and as a thank you to them, I post 4 to 6 bonus videos over on Patreon every single month. And recently, Mike Flanagan became a patron. Yeah, just keep watching. You just keep watching. His name is on there. So I don't know. It's a pretty good incentive to join over there if I do say so myself. But also because of the bonus content, and you get to keep me funded and make sure that all this wonderful free content is available for everyone else. Another gentle reminder to check out the GoFundMe linked down below for my next horror short film. I would adore you and be eternally grateful if you donated to that. But if none of that is for you, then all the rest of my social media is also linked down below, so go nuts, have fun over there. I can't wait to celebrate the rest of Pride Month with you guys. I hope that you subscribe and you stick around. But more than anything, I just hope that you enjoyed this video and that I catch you in the next one. Bye!